Queen Street United Methodist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Wesley Bible. But before I begin, I want to apologize to everyone who is watching online from last week's thing. I promise I will not wear that shirt again. This camera and that shirt had some problems, and it was a bit distracting. So I'm back to a white shirt, okay? and we'll see if we can get through the lessons today. We're starting out at chapter 13, and in 1 Samuel, the 3rd chapter. And the reason we're doing that is we had the lead up to it last week. But this is the Sunday school lesson that everybody likes to get out of 1 Samuel. So when you talk about the book of Samuel, and people think about that, this is the incident that they like to think about. And it makes a great Sunday school class, especially for children, okay? This one's not, so let's just go forward with it. All right, Samuel lay there. Now what's happened is that God has called Samuel 3 times already in the middle of the night. And he thought that it was the chief priest, Eli, who had called him. And then Eli realizes that if it's not me, who could it be? Well, it could be God, because where is little Samuel? Little Samuel is in the tabernacle, and he's sleeping in front of the ark. Seems like a really convenient place for God to speak to somebody, you know. Every once in a while, when I have issues, which I sometimes do, and when I was in my pastoral ministry, I would go into the sanctuary and kneel down at the altar and have my talk with God about what was going on, because it seemed like a good place to talk to God, okay? So anyway, and sometimes God would tell me what was going on, and okay, there you go. So Samuel lay there until morning. Now God has already talked to him.
I'm sorry, Dennis, where are we?
We are in verse 15. I'm sorry, verse 15.
And 12?
In chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Yeah. Okay, so Samuel lay there till morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord, which is everything that you see in Samuel when it refers to, now this is in Shiloh, okay? Shiloh is where the tabernacle of the Lord is. The tabernacle is a tent. Now, how well they gussied up that tent, I don't know. But the description of where the ark is has much more of a fixed presence. It's not, it's called the temple, but they didn't have a temple. Okay, they had a tabernacle. So anyway, he's opening the doors of the house of the Lord. Samuel was afraid to tell Eli, tell the vision to Eli, but Eli called Samuel and said, "Samuel, my son." He said, "Here I am." Eli said, "What is it that he told you? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you and more also." He's anticipating it's not good news. "If you hide anything from me of all that he told." So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. Then he said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." All right, now this is really interesting from my standpoint. Samuel has already received the bad news. There was a man of God who came up to him and told him everything that was going to happen to his family and to him. And it was bad news because of the corruption of his 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas. So Samuel already got a heads up. Then this boy has the same story. All right, why is there a difference? Well, because the man of God is an adult, and adults have agendas. Right? So the man of God was telling him what God thought of him and his kids, okay? But it might be that this guy had an agenda to remove him as priest, or the man of God might have been a candidate for high priest himself. And he just wanted to discombobulate Eli and make him insecure, okay? So what we have You don't know. It's an adult. Adults come with a lot of baggage. But here's this kid, and he's just a pure little boy, and he doesn't have an agenda. He's trying to learn everything he can from Eli. Eli is his hero, his mentor. You know, he's local parentis, and you know, this kid would never do anything to hurt Eli. And so when he gets the same spiel from Samuel, he realizes, uh-oh, what that guy told me is for real. Now, sometimes I need some guidance. A lot of times I need some guidance. Okay, my wife is nodding. And if it is guidance from the Lord, we kind of have this deal going that I'm going to get some hints. And I'll usually get like 3 hints of what's going on. And it could be in the course of just a normal conversation with somebody, and they have no idea that what's coming out of their mouth hits me like a ton of bricks. Or it might be an event that takes place. But what I'm looking for, when I think that God is speaking to me, when I think that God through a prayer, God will follow that up with usually 3 incidents of some sort, 2 or 3 incidents of that sort, that give confirmation to what I thought I heard. Okay, and we are slow learners, and we want to know if what I think I heard from the Lord is in my own head, or if God really is talking to me about stuff. And you know, it is good for us to challenge those things, because so many people think they heard God say something, and then they went out and did something absolutely despicable because they thought God allowed it, like, you know, genocide and that sort of thing. So you got to be careful with the word of the Lord, and you got to make sure as much as possible that what you're hearing is not just coming from what you would want to hear. Okay?
When you think Eli, thinking if I was Eli and someone came to me, even if I thought they might have an agenda, I would certainly think about what they said.
Oh, I would.
And he had to know his sons were, you know,
Oh, he did.
evil.
He already
And
chastised
so
them.
why, you think, my thought is, well, why didn't he try to do something?
Well, he did. He chastised them, but that didn't work. And you're kind of locked in, because the office of priesthood is not something that is based on your ethics. It's based on your genetics. It's based on, you're going to inherit this office, okay? And it's just like, you know, you might be the king and you have this boy who's a prince, and he's going to become king, and you know he's really going to blow it. Okay, you just know he's going to blow it, but you can't stop it, because when you're dead, he's king, right? Okay, well, the priesthood is like that, and I want to drop back into another field, is intelligence. One of the things that we do in intelligence is we try to figure out what your enemy wants to hear. What is the thing that your enemy wants to hear? And you want to do as much as possible to make sure your enemy hears it before you do something else. Okay? It's just like the invasion of Normandy. Hitler was bound and determined that the Allies were going to come in at Calais. And they did everything they could to convince him that they were coming in at Calais. They set up a totally fictitious army in England that was headed by General Patton, of all people, right across channel from Calais. Well, what do you know? You know, then they had a spy who was a double agent who kept feeding the Abwehr with all kinds of fictitious massive force that they certainly couldn't duplicate for 2 or 3 days, that this wasn't a diversion. So you want to know what the enemy wants to hear, and then you make sure that the enemy hears that. Okay, so you can divert. And that's why, if I think I'm hearing something, I want to make sure it's not something I just want to hear. I want some other confirmations. Okay, So I try to be careful with the word of the Lord, because some people aren't. So anyway, Eli knows that this is from the Lord. As Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, knew that Samuel was a trustworthy prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. All right, so the next scene, Samuel is an adult. Okay? It's important that we realize that Samuel is an adult, because if God is going to off Eli as high priest, somebody needs to be stepping into that, and it can't be a little boy. He needs somebody to transition this office to. Now, what's going on? As we mentioned last week, God has taken the priesthood out of the hereditary realm and is giving it to somebody based on God's relationship with that person and God's calling with that person. Okay? So now the whole concept of who can be high priest has been sabotaged. This is important from the standpoint of the Deuteronomist. Okay, the Deuteronomist, remember, is writing in exile. This guy is under the Babylonian captivity, or more, I think more likely under the Persian captivity. But if they are going to go back into their homeland and reestablish their religion, they may not be able to identify somebody with the proper lineage to become high priest, because they've been scrambled. The Assyrians have scrambled them, the Babylonians have scrambled them. Can you, who is certified grade A to be the priest? By breeding. Okay? So if they're going to come back into their homeland and reestablish the religion, the standard for priesthood needs to be someone with whom God is in communication. And what you're looking for with Samuel, the thing that confirmed him to be high priest, was the fact that his prophecies came true. His prophecies came true. Okay? Going back a few lessons, I talked about prophetesses that were in my churches. And there were occasions, especially with one of them, where she might say, "This is going to happen on Friday." And it did. Okay? So, this wasn't a Ouija board thing by any means. She was, a strong Christian, and the Lord talked to her. She was a prophetess. Okay? She would not have been, I think, a good pastor from the standpoint of being able to, administer churches, or maybe put together great sermons, or do the kind of research that would normally go into a sermon, because she was more spur of the moment kind of stuff. But she was in conversation with the Lord more frequently than I was. Okay? But when Samuel said something was going to happen, by God, it did. Okay? So now, we're going back to a situation where Eli is still high priest. And this is chapter 4. In those days, the Philistines mustered for war against Israel, and Israel went out to battle against them. They encamped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped at Aphek. Aphek is north of where the Israelites, this is where I wanted to get maps into this thing. I could show you where they were. The Philistines drew up in line against Israel, and when the battle was joined, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 on the field of battle. Now understand that numbers aren't the same in the Old Testament, okay? So if they say it was 4,000, it was probably like 4 units, okay? Some scholars say that maybe they lost 50 people in the battle, which would be, in those days, a very high casualty rate. Okay? There are a couple of things going on for the Philistines. One of them is that they typically own the high ground. And the other thing is that their weapons are superior. When the Philistines came in from the Aegean, they were a sea people. When they came in from the Aegean and they invaded Canaan, they just moved everybody out in front of them. They were extremely capable. They were technologically superior to anybody in that area. And they just cleared the territory. The Israelites have inferior weapons. We're talking the end of the Bronze Age. Okay, so it might have been that the Israelites are still carrying bronze swords, while the Philistines might have been carrying high grade. And how that transition happened. Bronze is very hard to get. Bronze is very expensive to get. You have to import tin from other places, from Afghanistan and other places, in order to mix it with copper to make bronze. So just the fact that you're making a bronze weapon is interesting, because only the government can afford to make bronze weapons, which means that only the government is armed. Okay? Iron is everywhere. Everywhere. People have iron. Okay? But iron by itself is soft. And so if you're having a bronze weapon against a rudimentary iron weapon, it might be good for arrowheads or spear points or something like that. But in terms of a duel, where you're banging stuff against each other, the effective. Now here's the issue that transforms this whole area. When you say the end of the Bronze Age, the beginning of the Iron Age, there's more to it than just metal, okay? Iron is everywhere. And all you have to do with iron to make it really, really good is to add carbon to it when you're working it. If you can add carbon to it, then you've got steel. Okay? But you don't have to be a king or a government to make an iron weapon. If you have a local smith, you can make iron weapons into steel weapons that are superior to bronze weapons. Okay? Now the government does not control who is armed. This is like a Second Amendment thing. All of a sudden, the population has access to their weapons. But at this stage, I don't think Israel did. Okay, so if they had bronze weapons, they had to have stolen them from people, or had somebody else to fashion them. And there was a tribe of Gentiles within Israel that did metalwork and blended these things, because it was not kosher to blend things. You couldn't blend metals. That was against Jewish law. Blending was not allowed. Okay, but if you add carbon, that's not a metal, right? So you can make a steel weapon. But anyway, we're in that transition period. We're in that transition period, and it has a lot to do with the structure of governments, who can own weapons, who can afford weapons, and that sort of thing. All of that is in transition at this point. But the Philistines have superior weapons. Okay. So they went out to war. They encamped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines at Aphek. The Philistines drew up in a line against Israel, and when the battle was joined, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed 4,000 men in the battle. Okay. When the troops came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, "Why has the Lord put us to rout today before the Philistines?" See, they thought God was going to be with them. All right? "Let us bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, so that he may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies." Okay, so they didn't have the Ark with them. It's up in Shiloh, which is, from the standpoint, a pretty good march to get there. And so they brought the ark down. So the people sent to Shiloh brought from there the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of Hosts, who was enthroned on the cherubim. The two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God. So the two corrupt guys are carrying the Ark. Okay? I think they would have to get spelled a lot because they were fat. This is not easy work. Okay. Okay, so when the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout so that the earth resounded. When the Philistines heard the noise of the shouting, they said, "What does this great shouting in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" Now, they're not calling them Israelites, they're calling them Hebrews, which is a derogatory term. It's like when the British called us Yankees. Because Hebrew comes out of an Egyptian word meaning foreigners, okay? Illegal aliens or whatever. It's like that. When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come to the camp, the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "Gods have come into the camp." Gods, plural, have come into the camp. They also said, "Woe to us, for nothing like this happened before. Woe to us, who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods?" So they think that their Hebrew adversaries are polytheists. Interesting. Now, the Philistines had a chief god, Dagon, or Dagon, I don't know which one it was. But anyway, their Dagon god wasn't the only one that they were aware of. Okay, and they thought that the Hebrews the same way. And, you know, by that time, the Hebrews really were worshiping a number of different gods. They were corrupt too. Okay. These are the Philistines in order not to become slaves to the Hebrews as they had been to you, men, and fight. So what you're looking at is the Philistines come up for battle against a slave revolt. Okay, this is a slave revolt against the Philistines because they've occupied the territory, they dominate the people there, and the Hebrews are rising up against them. So when they say the Philistines got ready to fight, it's like somebody was already there fighting. Okay, so they're reacting to a slave rebellion. So the Philistines fought Israel was defeated, and they fled everyone to his home. There was a very great slaughter, for there fell of Israel 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. Okay, understand that you're just talking about the tribes of Israel. Their mountain range from the coast to the mountains. They made incursions further east, and they've dominated the people there. What's happened is that other tribes have come to support the people in that area. That's the dynamics. The people are coming from areas that are not controlled by the Philistines. Okay, and you have this like with Saul, you know, and David. And David comes from the tribe of Benjamin, and he's, you know, they come up and fight Philistines. So, okay. So this is what's happened. A man of Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes torn, with earth on his head. So he's put dirt on himself as a form of mourning. Tore his clothes, dirt on his head. This is a bad news bringer. Okay? So when he arrived, Eli was sitting upon his seat by the road watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. When the man came into the city and told the news, all the city cried out. When Eli heard the sound of the outcry, he